into part two, I'd like to just kind of refresh that part one, just so we get into that mindset, first of all, of understanding the fight is something we always want to avoid, regardless. Fighting hurts. It hurts physically, could hurt financially. There could be some type of liability involved with it, obviously. So whether we're defending ourselves or not, it's just something that we really want to try to avoid. Obviously, unless you do things on the side, MMA, jiu-jitsu, self-defense classes, you know, with strangers, that's something you obviously will want to do anything to avoid. And what we talked about in part one was accepting the fact it could possibly happen to us. First of all, as we said, it's not probable, but it is definitely possible. And just because there's a possibility, like we spoke about in part one, having insurance is the reason that a lot of us will have our collisions taken care of, right? So we don't expect to wake up in the morning and think we're going to get into a car accident, but we have insurance just in case we do. So these classes that we offer, and even some other resources that we have, for instance, through Delta Defense that we partner with, you get to have that reassurance that if something were to happen, A, I know how to handle it, or I know how to avoid it, and B, I also know how to report on it. C, I have somebody then to back me up to make myself liable and not justifiable, or I'm sorry, justifiable and not liable in that kind of a situation. But very first thing right off the bat is we want to avoid this. What's the one fight that we don't lose? The fight that we don't get into. But how do we do that? First, by accepting, understanding it, taking training, getting on to little sessions like this, booking classes, doing anything that you can just to get an edge on personal safety and protecting yourself. But the second thing is understanding then and learning how to recognize danger. Everybody has situational awareness that they feel, and a lot of times that's geographical or environmental, wherever you grew up, or whatever your job is. However, understanding that I have to look for those signs. And if we remember from part one, those three signs that every single predator will show are observation, positioning, and posturing. They're going to target, acquire, they're going to then move closer to what that target is, potentially trying to avoid obstacles. And even if it's subconscious, they're going to try to get to you. Think about an individual moving across a parking lot, right? To try to get to you. They're going to try to weave in and out of cars. A to B is that straight line. And then the third is going to be posturing. They're going to show that physical posture before they actually physically attack you. So understanding those signs, that's going to help create a little bit of distance, which is our number one option, self-defense, which that's all self-defense is. It's just made of options. It's like opening a menu to your favorite restaurant and picking what you're going to do. But obviously the best thing on that menu always, first and foremost, is avoidance and distance, right? However, we did talk about our acronym, which was ARAR, accept it could happen, just like we talked about. The R is recognizing those signs. And then the next one we were just talking about there in the fight is acting. So acting doesn't have to be a physical fight or a physical self-defense. It could also even be showing the signs of de-escalation or trying to avoid that conflict, trying to get out of it with any means necessary, but also understanding that even though I'm going to try to de-escalate this, my personal safety is still my number one objective. I still have to get home to my kids, my family. I still have to get to my job. I still have to do life things, right? So acting is going to be one of our very most important things, and just doing something. And here's the thing, guys, we have to understand, first of all, doing something is better than nothing, no matter what that is. Something is always 100% of the time better than nothing. However, what we want to help you do is make it more effective, right? So you're going to leave today with some tangible things, understanding what I can do, even without any type of physical self-defense training that I've taken. There's some things that I have to have up here that I know if I can accomplish this, I'm going to create space and get away. But acting is the very first thing, right? In that physical self-defense. I want to try to avoid that danger. This is going to be a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, but if something does happen now where de-escalation didn't work, conflict avoidance didn't work, me creating space didn't work, I then have to understand I'm going to have to close the distance. Close the distance. I have to take that fire to the firefight. I have to take that fight to the fighter. I have to close that distance, because what that does is it automatically puts our attacker in our number four principle, which is make the attacker feel like the defender. And if I close that distance, not only does it mentally make that individual think, okay, wait, defense mode, right? Even if I'm falling backwards, it also, what it does is it cuts some of their effectiveness. When you take our self-defense classes, you're going to see, some prime examples of this, but just trusting me for at least this next few moments here and understanding that if I close the distance and I actually start taking the fight to the fighter effectively, hopefully, that's going to put him in defense mode and that's going to help me create more distance, right? But the last letter is that we're going to talk about before we wrap up today is recover. And that's going to be how do you articulate a good post-attack communication saying that I'm justifiable in what I did and not liable. And we'll get to that. But let's get to the nitty-gritty, right? Everybody's born with one of these hands. So that hand is what I'm going to use. I'm first going to use my eyes by understanding what I see, I'm going to believe. I'm then going to understand that my intuition is so important. If I have a bad gut feeling about a situation or about an individual, go through with avoiding that and then investigate. So I don't have to just go into a situation. One of the things we asked in part one was, has anybody been in that situation where they pulled into a place, we'll say a gas station, a grocery store parking lot, a mall, something, and they felt a little off. They saw something that maybe looked a little bit out of place, and they still went through with it. However, you wouldn't do that if you saw a police officer in the median and you were speeding, right? So we got to start putting some things into perspective. I'd pump the brakes on that police officer because I don't want to avoid a ticket. So I'd act. But what I have to think about is this situation where it's a dire situation, it could end up uh, taking me away from the people that I care about, and the people that care about me. I have to act on that. And that's the same thing, pumping the brakes and just avoiding it if possible, right? That's part of that action. But now I can't. So I have to think back to this hand. I'm going to take this hand and I'm going to go directly towards the eyes, A, and B. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this because I know some of you guys right now are probably a little squeamish to that. But B, to the throat. One of the things that we do with this course is we break up misconceptions. So let's hit pause on the hand for a second. We're born with that. Keep that in mind. But the one thing you're not born with is you weren't born with pepper spray in your hand. You weren't born with those brass knuckles that maybe some of you guys carry. You weren't born with, police officers weren't born with an asp or a meave or some type of a baton. You weren't born with anything external. For those of us that are firearms carriers, you weren't born with that sidearm. You weren't born with that pistol on your side, right? You weren't even born with it in the next side stand next to you. So what you were born with is exactly what's attached to you. That's what I'm going to use. All that other stuff, guys, takes training. And I'll give you an example that I'm 49 years old and I carried a firearm for a profession since I was 19. And I still need more training. And if I need more training, I would think that the majority of people that carry firearms, they need more training. I'm willing to admit that. And guys, I can tell you, I'm pretty decent with a gun, but I'm better with my hands because that's what I could go to. I could literally reach up and touch my other hand with my eyes closed. I don't know how much I could do with a firearm with my eyes closed, right? So understanding that we're going to use something that's attached to us is breaking up a huge misconception. And let me ask this: you guys share to, or if you guys care to share, how many of you out there carry pepper spray, tasers, something external, what we call, Jamie and I and our staff call an external, or I'm sorry, a secondary defensive device? How many guys carry one of those? Is there anybody out there? Yeah, I see Penny. Penny does. Mace. Julie says carries mace. So there we go, Stacy. So guys, by no means am I saying that these things don't work. They just don't always work as effectively as we want them to. I like where your head is. If you have that, anybody that carries those things, they're forward thinking. They're thinking, yes, they have accepted the fact that this could happen to me. However, I want you to ask yourself a question. When was the last time you trained on that external device? When was the last time you actually now even pulled it out of your purse, pulled it out of your pocket, pulled it out of whatever you're carrying it in, your holster even, under duress. For those of you that carry firearms, we say, well, yeah, never, right? Thank you, Penny. For those of us that train with even firearms, the most detrimental piece of equipment that you can have, going to the range isn't truly training. Going to the range is shooting a piece of paper that only moves if somebody opens that range door, right? It's not swearing at you, it's not intimidating you, it's not violent, and it's very controlled. As a matter of fact, most ranges that you go to, you shoot from a platform. You don't even pull it. So under duress, how many times have you actually pulled whatever piece of equipment you have? And you got to start thinking and putting into perspective now. If I've never done this under pressure, how do I know it's going to work? Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I don't want to go with that 99%. I want to go with that 100%, right? And I know 100% of the time I can use these hands, if anything, at least to de-escalate, to block, or to get those hands somewhere vital. I know I can do that. Now we're going to talk about conviction here in a little bit because I know some of the things that are going on in your head right now, wondering if you could actually do that. We're going to get to that. However, let's just understand the dynamics behind having a defensive tool that I don't practice on. First of all, do you even know that your pepper spray works? Second, do you even know that that pepper spray is going to work on that individual? And guys, I have bad news for you. If you have pepper spray and it's a deterrent, great. But if you're actually using it, there's going to be some blowback. You're going to get exposed to that pepper spray. And furthermore, if you don't hit that person directly in the eyes, it's really not going to do anything. It's going to do very little. As a matter of fact, I'm one of those weird individuals that for part of my career, I taught people with what we called OC, oleoresin resin capsicum, which is pepper spray, which is mace. And in order to be certified on it, you actually had to get it swiped into your eye or sprayed into your eyes and then fight through a gauntlet and then still be able to operate. So if I can do that, anybody can do that. Any human is capable of that, especially under the stress or duress of now understanding if I get caught, if I'm a bad guy and I get caught, I'm going to jail or I'm going to the hospital or I might die. All of you on here right now should be thinking if I get attacked, my number one priority, no matter what, is to live. I have to live to get back to my family and my main objective, which is those people that care about me and myself. However, those individuals that are attacking you, they're going through the same psyche. They're going through that same fear loop. And here's why. You have what's called sympathetic nervous system effects. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a car crash and a physical fight. If you guys can all think now of the last time you were never, but I keep it on my keychain. Good. If you ever take one of our realtor classes, Valerie, you'd know that keychains, well, they could be a little bit iffy, but I like where your head is. I like where your head is and that defensive mindset. However, the sympathetic nervous system effects, your brain doesn't know the difference between a car crash and a physical fight. If you could think back, if any of you guys have ever been into a car crash, or a near car crash, think about what that felt like. And this should sound somewhat familiar. Things seemed to slow down. My heart rate increased. I started to lose fine dexterity with my hands. I probably just gripped onto that steering wheel and hit that brake. And then afterwards, you were foggy. Things were a little bit off. Things were a little bit different. So let me explain in a little more detail what's happening physiologically. When you get into a physical fight or an attack or a car crash, your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rate increases, your blood rushes from your extremities to protect your heart and lungs and go straight to your heart and lungs. Your large intestines temporarily shut down. That's why you get that sick to your stomach feeling or you lose your appetite. You also have short-term hearing loss, short-term memory loss. So then it's hard to create a report, which we'll talk about near the end. All those things start to happen, and not all of us have all of them, but all of us have at least some of them. So with those things happening, that's going to be really difficult to operate under that stressful situation and that duress, right? What I can count on though is physically using my hands. As a matter of fact, if you have young kids, your kids have shown probably some temper tantrums. They were doing things like hammer fists. They've poked you. They've pulled, prodded. They've done some things with those tiny little fingers that you never had to teach. As a matter of fact, they probably know how to throw a knee strike and an elbow strike, and you never had to show them, right? When I picked up my young son when he was young from the back and he didn't want to leave, very first thing he did was threw his head back and almost busted my nose. I didn't have to teach him that, but that's something that we teach. It's something that naturally that we can physically do without thinking. So back to those sympathetic nervous system effects. If I'm suffering from all of those things, and by the way, your brain seems to slow down. Everything seems to slow down because from what I gather, any research that we've done with this, it shows that it's basically your brain searching for the right file out of the filing cabinet because it's not usually there. You're not getting into car accidents every single day. You're not getting into physical fights every single day. And I can tell you full well, I was an MMA fighter for years and I still train to this day. And walking into that ring or into that cage, no matter how many times I fought, I still started to feel the effects from those sympathetic nervous system effects. I started to feel that adrenaline dump, and I started to feel the things that would happen in a physical fight. And it's no different. The only thing that helps you guys is breathing for one, understanding breathing techniques, which never gets rid of it, but it does dissipate it slightly. And the other thing is training, literally doing it over and over again to where now it's a part of that mental blueprint. But we all don't have that right now. So we need something leaving this class today that builds some confidence that says, you know what, I have this mace, I have this taser, but this is backup. What's number one is me seeing and believing, feeling, and then believing in that gut intuition. And then if I can't avoid it, I got to close the distance and use these hands to the best possible way. Now, some of you right now are thinking, well, what about a knee strike? It's a misconception, right? A knee strike, and we hear this all the time, a knee strike to the groin. One of the misconceptions with that now is same exact reason that a lot of these external devices we think will work don't is because in a training environment, I don't have that adrenaline dump. If I get struck in the groin, a lot of times what will happen is during training, I fall to my knees. It hurts. It's terrible. But I'm better in just whether it's a few seconds or a few minutes. However, when I have that and I don't have that adrenaline dump, that becomes what we call a training bias, meaning during training, it's going to work. But in the real situation, it's not going to work typically because I don't have in training that same adrenaline dump, those same sympathetic nervous system effects. So you're going to be masked, but so is your assailant, which is good and bad. It's good for me because I'm not going to feel any pain until later that night. He's not going to feel any pain. So that means I have to do whatever is the most effective thing possible to make him number four feel like even though he's the attacker, he's defending himself even mentally. Here's how I do that. I take my fingers and I drive them straight through the eyes. I take my hand and I lift his chin as hard and as fast as I can to make his head go over the back of his heels, even slightly. I'm not saying to flip him. I'm not saying to take him down. I'm just saying get him to feel, even for a split second, that he has to defend himself and he will not want to be a part of that situation anymore. Sometimes they'll continue to fight. And if they continue to fight, I'm going to continue to drive these fingers into the eyes. The next is the throat. Your brain only contends with two places on your human body that says, I have to do something about this. That's my eyes. That's why we flinch. That's my throat because air gets to my lungs. Oxygen gets to my blood, blood goes to my brain. The sides of my neck, even if I place one finger here, my brain automatically says, get away from this. This isn't good because now if both get compressed, I'm passing out because it cuts that blood to the brain. Now, I'm not saying that you're choking anybody out, but what I am saying is take pressure, take anything you can and get pressure to those areas because that's what's going to make them defend. And that's what we want. We want that slight window of opportunity that we could slip through. Some of you are thinking right now, well, what about the groin? We just talked a little bit about that. So I'm not going to strike the groin. Our third and a lot of people's favorite, especially to train with, is we call it the doorknob. If something's happening where I'm being attacked and I can't get to the face, I can't get to the neck in time, I'm going to take my hand, I'm going to reach down to that groin area, anywhere that I can find in that groin area. I'm going to grab whatever I can, like a doorknob, and I'm late for work. I'm going to grab it, twist it, pull it. And the only time I'm going to let go is when I'm ready, not when he's ready. Now, some of you are thinking, and I know some questions well, that's a good question here. We're going to get back to your question here, Valerie. Some people will think, well, what if they don't have that equipment? We're not looking for the pain aspect of it. What we're really trying to do by reaching down, grabbing, twisting, pulling, the pain is great. Pain compliance is a bonus. But what we're really trying to do is get their hips to push back. If my hips get pushed back, if these are my hips and my hips get pushed back, look at what the tip of my fingers do. They come down. If my hips go back, my head comes down. My head comes down. Now that gives me a great opportunity then to reach up to those eyes, to reach up to that chin and drive straight through and get the back of his head over his heels. If my head goes over my toes, side to side on my feet or my heels, I lose balance. If I have no balance, I have no power. If I have no power, I don't have effectiveness, guys. So that's what we want to try to drive into this individual. Self defense 101 is easy. Avoid it if possible. If I can't avoid it, de escalate. If I can't de escalate, now I got to fight. And for me to fight, I'm going to do it the most effective way possible. I don't need all these fancy, flashy techniques. We could teach you techniques all day long, but it's always going to end with this. Do anything you can to make that individual feel like they're defending themselves and do it effectively, hard, fast, and effective. And when you do that, do it relentlessly until you can then get away. So let's go back to a couple of questions. Valerie asked, "How long does my pepper spray last?" That's a great question, and I'll be honest with you, I have no idea. So, some of you guys, I know from a law enforcement military perspective, I believe it had a shelf life of 3 years. However, they changed it out every year, at least with the agency that I was with. So that tells you something. If there is a shelf life, well, then that means there's a possibility that it won't last that long, it doesn't last forever. And how do you know? Have you ever tested it? Have you actually ever tried to spray your pepper spray at a moving target or even a stationary target? And I don't suggest this, but some of you learned this on accident probably. What does it feel like if it gets into your eyes or nose? Guys, it sucks. It's horrible, but it's still not life threatening to an individual. There are some psychological effects of it. You do feel like, because it affects your mucous membranes, you do feel like possibly you can't catch your breath. You do feel like it's burning. However, some people, and this is an actual statistic, in fact, there are people that are Hispanic that aren't even affected by pepper spray. So if that's a part of our population, and they're not as affected. Well, what if that's the individual that's attacking you? You just never know this, right? So, because I don't know, what I'm going to go to is what I do know. And what I do know is I'm going to fight like hell to get back to my family. I'm going to fight like hell because I need to live. And the way that I'm going to fight like hell is I'm going to take what God gave me, what I was born with, and I'm going to drive them straight through the most effective area that I can find on that individual. Matter of fact, if you sit back and think, where would I not want to get hit? Or where would I not want to feel pressure from somebody else? That's what I want to do to that individual. So let's look at some of these questions here. Sorry, I got my laptop shaking here a little bit. Stacy says, any input on the legality and stun guns, the little handheldables? Okay, so great question, right? First of all, if guns are legal, so are tasers. You can have a taser. Obviously, it's considered what we call a less lethal. So technically, you still can cause some type of lethal aspect to a situation if you have a taser. Imagine if they fall down and hit their head on a curb. Imagine if their heart just can't take it. However, that still falls in the line with what were you doing to defend yourself? And Stacy, we're going to talk a little bit about this near the end about how to make yourself justifiable in that situation rather than liable. So we're going to come back to that slightly, but just know this, it still falls under self-defense. And we have to understand that for us to use those things, you're going to be questioned and you're going to be asked that simple question. Were you defending yourself? And furthermore, were you defending yourself from imminent danger of your life being taken? And we'll get to that. However, let's go back to the action for right now. If I'm in the situation now where I have to depend on something that's not my hands or not my body, I'm not saying don't use it, guys. What I am saying is practice on it. Practice on it and have the mindset that this is going to be something that is secondary. It's not going to be my initial reaction. As a matter of fact, some of you guys are probably thinking right now, well, before I leave a store or before I leave work and it's late out and it's dark and I'm alone, walking to my car, I know I'm gonna see some head nods with this. I put my key in between my knuckles. I love where your head is. However, have you ever hit anybody that way? Don't answer that question. We don't want to know. But I'm assuming that the majority of you guys have probably never thrown a true effective taught punch. But you're going to have to do that with that key. If I don't know how to punch, how do you know how to strike somebody effectively with a key in between your fingers? Furthermore, what are you going to do with that key? The only real effectiveness from that is if you hit him in the eye. Because if you hit me in the face, the chest with a key, it's really not going to do anything. And we go back to once again, if I have that adrenaline dump, I'm not going to feel that pain. However, if you do hit him in the eye, you probably will, because that's where they're now, the brain is cycling saying, this is bad. I got to get away from this. But guys, I could tell you from an individual, I have fought for many years, and being accurate is not easy. You're not just going to automatically, because you think it, strike somebody to the most effective area with a key and external device. But what I can do, if you just close your eyes and put your hand to your own chin, I can find my eyes pretty easily. And most humans are made up the same way, right? So if I know if I can get my hand, my palm heel to that individual's chin or jaw, I can now start driving my fingers into their eyes. If I can get even to the top of the head, the side of the head, I can find their eyes. Think that before you start thinking external device. Put the keys away, get the keys ready, get your key fob ready, put that possibly in your non-dominant hand, walk to your vehicle scanning, and if you see something, walk back. Avoid the danger. If this is an ambush, this individual comes out of nowhere, out of the dark, now I'm going to use my hands and I'm going to use them to the most effective way possible. So let's talk about conviction, because I know some of you guys right now are thinking, well, if this were to happen, I don't know if I have it in me to do that. We usually save this for the end, but I think this is a good time for all of us to kind of dig deep and try to ask ourselves if we could really do this. So that question, I want you to ask one time to yourself, and that's it. That's the one and only time you're going to ask. Now, the answer is going to be yes. From here on out, for the rest of your life, I want you to think, if somebody were to attack me, I'm going to do what I have to do to get back to my kids, because that's the deal changer. That's the deal breaker. Most people we ask or ask us, hey, what if you're one of those people that I just don't know if I'm going to be able to really get myself to do something that aggressive and that brutal? We'll ask them the very simple question. What if your kids were there? The second somebody hears that question, they automatically start thinking and start telling us, oh, well, that's it. My kids are involved. Anything goes. But guys, when you're not with your kids, you still have kids. And if I'm at the grocery store and I'm leaving that grocery store and my kids are at home, I still have my kids. My kids or someone is still expecting me to come home. So why would I fight any different? Because they're still counting on me. If everybody could raise their hand and if ask the simple question, do you have somebody that you care about? Now raise your other hand if you have somebody that cares about you. Because of those two things, guys, I'm not going to just fight for me. I'm going to fight for them. A lot of times we hear, well, I would die for them. How about I would live for them? I would literally do anything gross, anything aggressive, anything brutal to get back to those people that care about me and that are expecting me to be home, and for me to get back to the people that I care about. That's the answer to the question. That's conviction. It's also backed by the how dare you type of feeling. How dare you try to take me away from the people that love me? How dare you try to take me away from the things that I love to do? How dare you just try to even think that I'm the one that you could have gotten over? And if you don't want to do it, if you don't have anybody, picture this. He does it to you and he gets away with it, there's going to be somebody else that he's doing it to. For do it, so do it for that individual that he hasn't gotten to yet. Put the period at the end of the sentence right there. This will never happen again to anybody else. And I want to make sure of it. So do it for all those reasons. Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about the liability of this, guys. And then we're going to open this last 10, at least 10-ish minutes up for some questions for everybody. But let's talk about justifiable compared to liable. The one thing that law enforcement and the court system always wants to see with a self-defense situation is that you were the victim. So I'm not saying, let's go out and play victim, but what I am saying is be intelligent enough to be able to report back and give your testimony that you truly were the victim, and here's how we're going to prove it. The very first thing is understanding that your life is worth everything. And if your life is worth everything, I now know that if I feel in jeopardy, I'm going to act a little bit differently. There's got to be four elements that have to be present to make a use of force or a self-defense situation justifiable and not liable. First one is just that, jeopardy. Did you feel that your life was in imminent danger? Did you feel scared? Did you feel scared for your life? Did you feel in jeopardy? Easy question to answer. Nobody but the man upstairs and you can tell you if you truly felt in jeopardy. So, guys, you're all in jeopardy. If you're in this situation and this person is now observing you, closing the position on you, and now showing physical posture that they're going to attack you, you're in jeopardy. The second now is, did they have the physical ability to do harm to you? And these are all things I could report on or give back. The physical ability, in any way you want to report on it, is this person was walking across the park on. This person already attacked me. This person was trying to kick my door in. This person has broke my window. This person is physically able. And if they don't even appear, if they call you on the phone and say, I'm going to do this, that shows intent. And I'm going to trust that they have the physical ability or they know someone that has the physical ability to do so. And I'm going to report on all that. The third now is opportunity. A lot of people get that confused with ability. Opportunity is proximity. It's just that. Our third principle is generate force to the best target of opportunity. What's your best target? First of all, the eyes and the throat. Third would be the groin area. But do I have the opportunity to get to that? I just showed you one way. If I get to the groin, get their hips pushed back, I can then reach up and get to their eyes or their throat. Best target of opportunity is going to be what's going to be the most effective at that time. How I have to report that or give my testimony is this person was close enough to do damage. And guys, let's talk quickly about spacing and opportunity. If I were to ask everybody on this session right now, what is your personal space? The majority of people would say an arm's distance. But I want you to walk up to a complete stranger. I don't want you to do it. It's like Fight Club, right? First rule of Fight Clubs, don't talk about it. Seconds, we're all going to get in a fight, right? Just pick on somebody and beat them up. Let's not do that. If you do it, don't blame it on weapon brand. However, I have to draw my line in the sand. And if you walk up to somebody within an arm's distance and you don't know them, they're going to wonder why you are so dang close. So why would anybody else? Why would I allow anyone else to get that close? Now, some of us have jobs. I'll give you an example. A nurse, when I would teach people in the healthcare industry, they'd say, well, we got to take blood pressure. We got to give injection. We have to do things that were close to individuals, do assessments. I'm not saying you can't do your job. What I am saying is the second you know you're within that personal space or somebody's within your personal space, that awareness flag has to start to go up, and I have to start drawing my hands out and keeping my hands free above my waist in front of me. And I just have to have that psyche that I'm just going to watch. This person is this close. I'm just now opening this up for investigation. I'm just going to fill the gaps. I'm going to make sure that I watch and assess and make myself safer by at least having my hands free, at least communicating, making eye contact, and acknowledging presence, like we talked about in part one. So that's opportunity. Opportunity is now how close are they? Are they close enough to do damage to you possibly, right? The last, and it's part of our preclusion, or I'm sorry, part of our de-escalation is just that preclusion. How do I preclude this event? And For those of you that carry firearms, I know what you're getting a little defensive right now internally. You're thinking, well, wait, this guy is saying that I have to leave. I have to try to preclude that event before I protect my family. It's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is you do have to preclude, at least attempt to preclude that event, but it's easy to do. Simply, if I were to state in a report, this individual started to close the gap on me, he was within my personal space or entering my personal space. Therefore, I said, back up, back, please stop, or at least bare minimum, had my hands in a defensive posture. Guys, that already right there shows preclusion. Part of de escalation is just that. How do I show that I'm the one trying to talk this down? I'm the victim. I'm trying to talk this down and not escalate it. That's where there's a real fine line, especially our firearms carriers. You have the right to protect yourself, whether it's with a hand, whether it's with a taser, whether it's with mace or a firearm. But I still have to show that I have to show the immediacy of it. Is it happening right now? First of all. Second, am I the victim? Now I have to present that possibly in a testimony and even possibly to a court. Understanding those four elements are pretty easy, guys. I have to be in jeopardy. They have to have the ability. They have to have the opportunity. And now, how did I show preclusion? Now, if it's a complete ambush, if I'm just attacked in a parking lot, obviously, guys, all those things are met. Now it's just time for you to get down to business. And our number five, fight until the last breath and have in your brain, it will not be your last breath. I'm going to fight to the last breath and I'm going to survive and get back to that person that I raised my hand for that I care about. So, the last thing I'll tell you guys about at least making yourself justifiable is there's also what's called totalities of circumstance. That means everything that surrounds the incident. Have I seen this individual before? Does this guy have a rap sheet? Did this guy already say something that was threatening, maybe at a time prior? Am I smaller than the individual? Is it nighttime? Did we end up on the ground? All these things count, guys. If this person's in my house and it's a stranger, obviously that's meeting the totality of the circumstance. So with all that being said, it's really easy to justify yourself. So what I want you to do is have confidence in the fact that you can react and you can react violently if violence presents itself. So with that, guys, I'm going to open it up for some questions and we could dig into some things if you'd like. James, do you want to read out some of the questions if you see them? Uh-oh. Did we
Sorry,
lose
I
Jamie?
forgot I was on mute.
Oh.
Um,
Jamie, are
Valerie,
you having a hard time seeing that too? How old are
3 weeks younger than you. Um,
you?
Valerie also asked if it's necessary, what about taking out their knees slash shins? And I
Yeah.
mentioned we'll go over that in our self-defense class that is coming
Yeah.
well, but you might want to touch on it here a little bit.
Sure. Let's touch on it. So I'm going to tell you right now, and you guys are going to think that I'm arrogant when I say this, but I'm going to tell you the truth. When I took over the state of Ohio's personal defense program, they had a technique and it was called a shin rake. A shin rake, just like a toe stomp, is absolutely worthless. Keeping in mind, doing something is always better than nothing. However, you've hit your shin before, you've hit your toe before. It sucks, it hurts. But did you have an adrenaline dump? Could you feel it? Guys, think about places that you're not going to feel pain, and that's one of them. I fought barefoot, and if you turn on any type of fight, every Saturday there's some channel that has some type of MMA fighting. They're fighting barefoot, and they do toe stomps. They don't stop the fight; they simply do it just to change position. I've broken toes fighting. Your individual is likely, excuse me, not going to be barefoot. It's not really going to do anything, and I can tell you this if you have the energy and the capacity to do a shin rake and to do a toe stomp, then you have the energy and capacity to do something a little more effective. If that's all you have and your arms are tied, think about where your hands will be. Dig behind you and find that groin. Get their hips to go back. Get them to go in defense mode. I want you guys to think now anywhere is better than nowhere. However, the eyes, the throat, and the groin are the top three places that I want to go to and I want to attack to then create distance. what I did with that shin rake when I took over the program for the state of Ohio is I got rid of it. It's out. Now, with that being said, they all knew that just fighting back any way you can is still the best thing you could do over nothing. But to make it even better, to make it the even bester, you're going to do something more effective. And that's going to be to the eyes, throat, or number three, the groin. But if you're asking that question, I like where your head is. That means you're visualizing it. And guys, the one thing we talked about in part one that so many people miss out on is it really stinks to have to do this, but visualization is still a part of training. If you just have a few minutes in your car before you get out of that car and walk into that store, I want you to take a few seconds to do a couple of things. First of all, scan. Scan and look for that hungry tiger that's possibly making you the prey. And number two, I want you to just come up with a scenario in your head and I want you to play out scenarios. That's a form any special operator will tell you that we went over so many visualizations. And if this happens, this is what I do. If this happens, it's not just talking about it, it's actually sitting down and actually just thinking it through and thinking what you've done. Because, guys, the body can't go where the mind's never been. And if I visualize, even without certain physical training is always the best possible thing you could do, or situations like classes like this. However, visualizing it, like I'm trying to get you guys to do right now, at least puts you in that capacity to where now you think, this is what I could do. Now, this could be better. And just start playing it through. But I like where your head is. If you're at least fighting back, asking that question, your head's in the right place. So if we can get everybody in our community, because this is where we live, uh, to start thinking that way, avoid if possible. If I can't avoid, what's the most effective thing I could do to get back to my kids? That's what I'm going to start visualizing and start playing that out in your head. What do we got next, James?
Ryan, another Valerie Hoskovich has had her hand up for quite some time, and then
Oh,
we
okay.
have three other questions that are typed out. So if you want to, if Valerie Hoskovich, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, then we'll get to the ones that are in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just had a question because it seems like a lot of the discussion is about people that are approaching you or coming up to you. I had a case where I took an Uber home from a
Mhm.
Lightning game, and the driver in the middle of the drive on I-4 said, "I want all your cash." He turned off his
Wow.
thing and said, "I want all your cash." And we're
Mhm.
like, we don't have any cash. And so he pulled over on the side of the road and said, "Get out." And so on
Wow.
I-4, but that was one of the things, like if, let's say he didn't, kick us out, he just continued
Yeah.
to drive until,
Yeah.
whatever he wanted to take us. What in those cases, when you're being taken and you voluntarily went into a vehicle, what happens in those
Yeah.
cases? What should you do?
So, Valerie, thank you so much. And that's a horrible story. But, like we learned in part one, some of the stories that we tell and we hear from people, that's how we learn, right? So, thank you so much for sharing. So, this could help save somebody's life. So, thank you, Valerie. But, we have rideshare safety programs. We teach rideshare drivers and people, obviously, that take ride shares, like yourself. And the one thing we continuously tell them is, first of all, if before you, and you may not have felt this, but before you get in, obviously there's some protocols you have to go through, like a little checklist, right color car, license plate, is it the name, is it the right individual? Maybe even do, if you have time, do a little background check on the individual. If you see the name pop up, they have some different descriptions about the individual a lot of times with Uber and Lyft. But now, once you're in it, the very first thing you have to think is, if I'm locked in this cage with this animal, how do I get out? Luckily for you, he just kicked you out. And I know it doesn't sound lucky, but the alternative is exactly what you're asking. What if he continues to go? The good news is he's behind the wheel, so he's going to be somewhat occupied. Bad news is who knows where he's taking you. So I want you to remember this. Everybody on this, and some of you guys know where I'm going with this because you heard it in part one. There are two reasons that I'm going to do literally anything that I can. Two reasons, two times when I'm going to draw my line in the sand and I'm going to fight back like a bat out of hell. I'm going to do anything I can to get back to that family that I love, right? And that's one is if they want to move me from point A to point B, whether that's from one corner of the room to the other corner or from that vehicle to another location, right? I am now drawing my line in the sand and I'm fighting back. And the number two is, and I'm sure you felt both of these. The number two is when I feel in my gut that now my life is possibly in imminent danger. Even if somebody draws a gun on me, I'm going to give them my belongings. I'm going to give them the things that I could possibly work for to get back. But what I can't get back is my life or my body. So now the second that that happens, I'm fighting back. So for you, man, that situation's horrible. Luckily, he let you out, but if he didn't, it's time to really do anything you can. Break windows, unlock doors, use the seatbelt, do anything you can. Obviously, with safety in mind, him driving, but you're going to have to fight. And what I would do in that situation, every situation dictates, but just playing this through in my mind, what I would do is let him drive, but continue to get close, continue to try to de-escalate, continue to try to talk to the individual until that car is stopped. And when that car is stopped, my hands are on and I'm going to that individual's most delicate places and I'm going to make him pay for what he just did for me to escape, at least for those few seconds. So the bottom line here for everybody, and thank you, Valerie, is fight back. That's it. Now, if you're in a vehicle and you're trapped in that vehicle, obviously you're just that. You're trapped within a cage. Talk, 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 close the distance, get close to that driver, look for any exit possible. If you can, dial 911 on your phone and even just let it sit there and let them hear the conversation. They're going to start to locate you. Do anything you can to get more eyes, more ears, and more hands on that situation. So were you with anybody else, Valerie?
Yeah, I was with my best friend at the time, and
Yeah.
was the driver. I mean, he was the actual driver. That was he was the picture. His car was. I mean, everything was. He turned the
Yeah.
Uber like he didn't pick us up. He acted like he didn't pick us up, and
Hmm.
then we called Uber,
Gotcha.
to let them know, and they said, "Well, we'll make sure he doesn't pick you up again."
Gotcha. That's what the response was.
I was like, you know what? Never again am I taking an Uber.
Yeah.
So,
And Valerie, you're entitled to your own convictions, but I would tell you, something that we really believe in is there's more good people out there than bad. And I'm sure there's more good rideshare drivers out there than bad, but we just have to really be aware and start recognizing the signs of that one bad person. Unfortunately, if you were to draw all the way back out of that situation and just really investigate it, I would be sure that there's some type of signs that made it look a little bit backwards, right? Or made it look a little bit off. But even if it wasn't, the bottom line is your life is the most important thing in the world because once you're gone, you're gone. Um, but if we could just start diving into those precarious situations, when we start feeling like it's a little bit ominous or a little bit of a precarious situation, I need to start to investigate. So not that you did anything wrong, because Valerie, I've done that a million times. I've gotten into Ubers and looked after I've been in, make sure he was that right individual. So, and I'm the self-defense guy. So you did nothing wrong. Just let's start doing a little better. That's all. And man, thank you for sharing that because, like I said, that could potentially save somebody's life. So I hope that helps you out a little bit. And one reason I asked if anybody was with you is because my mind tells me that if you were alone, things may have been a little bit different. He may have tried to take you somewhere.
Brian, the next question is what do you do if you see them approaching with a weapon? Thank you, Kathleen, for that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, as a company called Weapon Brand, you also carry a weapon. Our whole tagline is be your own weapon against whatever it is, depression, sickness, an assailant, another athlete in sport, be your own weapon, right? So I want you to start thinking they may have a weapon, but I'm also a weapon. And let's go back to the very beginning. That weapon that they have, obviously, that's what in law enforcement, what we call a force multiplier. We could actually do more force now if that individual has a weapon. But I want you to think that in the terms of I'm going to do more. I'm going to do anything I can. If I have to end this individual's life to save my own, up to and including that, I'm going to do that. However, anybody, whether they have a weapon or they don't have a weapon, could potentially be dangerous. Meaning, if I see that individual, they just acquire that target. I see them now make eye contact. Now I see them moving closer to me. Now they're moving closer to me. I got to start creating distance. Get anything you can in front of them, whether it's a car, a pillar, a rock, anything, your hands, create distance, get away. And the second that you know now you can't, you have to close the distance on that individual. And it's hard for you guys, maybe most of you, to understand this, but we teach what's called weapon retention, holding onto your firearm, or if somebody pulls a firearm on you. And we also have a class called knife defense. In both of those classes, we continuously try to drill in you that if I can't get away, I got to close the distance and get to that weapon, because now that's becoming affected by your hands. So what I would tell you is, if you can't get away, close it. Get to that gun, get to that knife, get to whatever they have. Obviously, guys, if I can't get away, I close the distance on them and I start using anything I can to make them want to get out of that fight. And that's a horrible situation to be in. God help you if you are, but I can tell you, you continue to take these classes, continue to do your own research and ask questions like that. You're going to be okay, because you're going to learn to fight.
I was just typing to Stacy. She asked where they can sign up, and you can go to weaponbrand.com. If you go to the calendar section, weaponbrand.com/calendar, it has all of our upcoming events, including some free ones. You guys will also all be on our one time per month email list, that you'll get an email from us stating what events that we have coming up that month. So you're also going to get a $25 offer from Weapon Brand if you put in a promo code, which will be sent to you in your emails. When you sign up for those classes, you'll get $25 off the class just for being a Pinellas County employee. There were a couple other questions. We have about 4 minutes. And
Do it.
Brian, somebody had mentioned calling 911, which is,
Yeah.
but if you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So we talk about calling 911 as part of our misconception category. And by no means is calling 911 a misconception, but when you do it is. So we're all conditioned, right? Through media, through growing up, we're all conditioned that if something happens, immediately I have to call 911. However, I want you guys to ask yourself this question. If a fire broke out in the room that you're sitting in right now, would you call 911 from that room? Likely you wouldn't. You're going to get to a safe place before you call 911. Here's a couple of reasons why. Obviously, if I have my phone in my hand, my hand is occupied. I need that hand. I need those fingers. Some of you that are saying, well, if I could hit him with my phone, that sounds, I like where your head is. But obviously, have you ever hit anybody with a phone? And is it really going to be that effective if they have that adrenaline dump? So I want to keep that phone at least somewhere near me, but I want to make sure I get out of what we could consider the contaminated area where that fire is, get to a safe place. And here's the other reason why. When you guys leave this session, I want you to really hold on to something that we're going to tell you guys. You are your own first responder. The good guys are coming. The guys and gals in blue, they're going to get there. But can anybody guess what the national average police response time is to an incident? I'll just throw it out there for you, because I know some of you guys are saying some wild stuff probably, right? It's 18 to 20 minutes. That's national average. Let's cut that completely down. Let's say it's 5 minutes. Let's say a police officer can get to you in 5 minutes. Guys, your incident is going to last under 40 seconds. Average for an incident is actually just under 30 seconds. They're not getting there that fast, which means I have to be my own bodyguard. I have to be my own first protector. I'm going to do every single thing I can to avoid this situation. If I can't avoid it, I got to fight out of it. Then I'm going to get them on the hook and get them there. And guys, if they show up and it's still going on, that's an entirely different situation. If you do call 911, you get through and they actually get there to help save you, that's amazing. Just know it's pretty unheard of. And I worked in law enforcement for 21 years. So just know, guys, that the very first thing that I have to do is make sure I'm safe. whether that's through space or through fighting to get space, I have to make sure I'm my first responder with that, then call 911. We'll go over a lot more of that as far as our misconceptions in upcoming classes, especially with our having a home defense plan when we go over with you guys, because that's going to be one of the topics is calling 911 from your home, which obviously is always a great idea, but after I'm at least not being attacked at that instant.